Practice. You'll hear a series of questions. After each beep, respond to the question appropriately by redirecting either to the questioner, the group, or someone else on your team. Brian is in charge of marketing, so he can answer questions about that. Are you ready? Let's give it a try.
Well, I've been thinking a lot about your proposal. Don't you think this is a good opportunity for us to move into new markets?
Don't you think there is some way we can get the training done faster? Surely someone must have some ideas.
What I'd really like to know more about is the marketing situation in Central Europe.
Well, how did it go? Let's listen to some example answers for you to compare.
Well, I've been thinking a lot about your proposal. Don't you think this is a good opportunity for us to move into new markets?
That's an interesting question. You must have thought quite a lot about this. What's your own view on that?
Don't you think there is some way we can get the training done faster? Surely someone must have some ideas.
That's a good question. Let's go around the table and get some other views on this.
What I'd really like to know more about is the marketing situation in Central Europe.
That's a good question, but I'm afraid it's not really my field. Brian, can you help to answer that?
For further practice, it's always a good idea to go back and try again. Substitute different expressions to build fluency. Great. That just about brings us to the end of today's episode. This was the second in a two-part series on dealing with questions. Today, we covered several important skills for Q&A: avoiding answering, dealing with irrelevant questions, and redirecting. We've also learned several useful idioms. This unit also concludes our discussion of the skills and language of presentations. We've covered a lot of material over these 9 units. Let's briefly review what we've learned. 1. How to introduce your presentation and get your audience's attention. 2. Important signposting language that will make the structure of your talk very clear. 3. Dealing with visuals. 4. Describing charts and graphs and emphasizing key points. 5. Analyzing data and making predictions. 6. How to use your voice effectively in a presentation. And 7. Great strategies for how to deal with questions. Let's end with some general practice tips. A great way to review is by using the skills we've studied in your own presentations. You may wish to videotape or record your practice sessions and get feedback from a friend. Finally, on a personal note from me, Clayton Lee, let me wish you all good luck in your studies and your careers. Keep reviewing and practicing. Armed with the strategies and language we've covered in these lessons, we'll all be presenting for success. Thanks for listening and take care. You're listening to Business English Pod, the Business English podcast for professionals on the move. Do you ever need to persuade or convince someone of your point of view? Do you need to win support for a proposal or get backing for a project? Of course you do. Persuasion, convincing someone of something, is an essential part of almost everything we do, from informal discussions to formal negotiations. To be successful, you need to be persuasive. You need to get people to accept a different point of view, to see things your way. How can you be more persuasive? In this 3-part series, we'll be giving you some of the answers. Throughout the years, Many talented speakers and researchers have been developing ways to persuade people effectively. One of the most widely used methods is Alan H. Monroe's. In the mid-1930s, Monroe created a persuasive process called the Monroe sequence that has become a standard in business, media, and politics. Once you know it, you'll recognize it everywhere, in speeches, statements, proposals, and advertisements. It's popular because it's logical and effective. So, over the next 3 episodes, we'll be studying language and strategies for persuasion based on the Monroe sequence. The Monroe sequence has 5 parts. First, get the audience's attention. Second, establish a need. Third, satisfy that need. Fourth, visualize the future. And fifth, ask for action. This show will focus on the first step, getting the audience's attention. The listening takes place at Swift, a bicycle manufacturer whose major market is the U.S. We'll be listening to a good example and a bad example of persuasion. First, let's examine the bad example. Franz Barbosa is the new production supervisor at a Swift factory in Brazil, where most of the company's manufacturing is done. In one room in the production center, employees work on welding bike frames. To weld means to use a hot flame to attach metal parts. During the summer, when the temperature outside is 31 degrees centigrade, the temperature in the welding room is over 37 degrees. Last year, 19 out of 36 workers quit because they could not bear the heat. This turnover happens every summer. To solve this problem, Franz has gone to Swift management to request they insulate and air condition the production center, which would cost $300,000. To insulate means add material to the walls to protect the room from heat. Air condition refers to using a machine to keep the room cool. Unfortunately, it's not possible to air condition the welding room alone. Here are the listening questions for the first dialogue. First, whose needs does Franz focus on? That is, whose needs is he taking into consideration when he makes the proposal? And second, why is Franz's proposal so ineffective?
My proposal is simple. Please put air conditioning in the welding room. This past summer, 1/3 of our employees quit because it was so hot. It's not fair that they have to work in unbearable temperatures while we managers sit in our air-conditioned offices. I propose that we solve this problem by air conditioning the welding room to bring down the temperature to 30 degrees. Insulating and air conditioning the welding room would cost about $300,000. I urge you to approve this request. Thank you.
Sorry, friends. What exactly is your point? How do we justify this?
It doesn't sound like Franz's boss is very supportive of this proposal. Why is Franz so unsuccessful, so unpersuasive? To answer this problem, let's go back to the listening questions. Whose needs does Franz focus on? In other words, whose perspective is he viewing the problem from? Remember, Franz says of the workers,
It's not fair that they have to work in unbearable temperatures while we managers sit in our air-conditioned offices.
So, obviously Franz is viewing the problem from the worker's perspective. Of course, there's nothing wrong with this, but from the management's point of view, it's not very persuasive. In this situation, as in so many cases, what's good for the workers is also good for the business. However, to be persuasive, Franz needs to discuss the issue in terms of the management's needs. Predictably, a couple of years later, Franz has been fired. His replacement, Steve Siddell, makes the same proposal to install air conditioning in the production center. Now, the price of insulation and air conditioning has risen to $500,000. But with such a high staff turnover, the company is losing money every summer. Let's listen to how Steve starts off his presentation. While you listen, see if you can answer these questions. You can check your answers in a few days at www.businessenglishpod.com. First, what does Steve do at the beginning of his presentation? And second, whose needs does Steve focus on, the workers or the management's?
Swift lost $181,000 in profits last summer due to a 16% drop in productivity in our production center here. That's not unusual. This factory has a history of low summer productivity. But if I told you we could reverse the trend and bring summer productivity in line with the rest of the year, would you be interested?
What do you have in mind, Steve?
Well, the problem starts in the welding room.
Steve's proposal is off to a good start, isn't it? His introduction is so effective for two main reasons. First, he gets the audience's attention. Second, he focuses on his audience's needs, which in this case is how can Swift save money? The first step in the Monroe sequence is getting the audience's attention. If no one's listening, your words will have no impact. To persuade people effectively, you first need to make sure they're paying attention. There are many ways you can do this. For example, you can pose a problem.
How can we increase the scale of our business without hiring more staff?
Have you ever wondered why our electricity costs are higher in the winter than they are in the summer? Well, if I could show you a way to reverse this trend, would you be interested?
You can also ask a rhetorical question. A rhetorical question is a question that you answer yourself or one that everyone already knows the answer to.
Can we afford to lose any more clients? No, of course not.
Do we need to cut costs? Are we looking for ways to increase sales? Yes, of course we are.
One of the best ways to get attention is to make a startling or surprising statement.
Here's a little known fact. Last year, our workers averaged only 3 hours of productive time per day.
It's hard to believe, but our raw materials costs have gone up by 37% in the last 2 months.
Another thing you can do is tell a story. Everyone likes to hear a good story, especially when it involves the people present. How can you begin a story?
You know, when I first started working in this company 5 years ago,
When I think about all the hard work we have put into this marketing campaign, I remember our first meeting together in January.
Some people like to use an interesting quotation that's relevant to their topic. How do you introduce a quotation?
Mark Twain once said, "There are lies, damned lies, and statistics."
I am reminded of the famous words of chess master Tartikover. Victory goes to the player who makes the next to last mistake.
Many audiences like it when you tell a joke or make a humorous comment.
I think most of you will agree. What do salespeople usually mean when they say a product is new? They mean it's a different color from the previous design.
Who here can tell me what a management consultant is? It's a person who solves a problem you didn't know you had in a way you don't understand.
Finally, as the old saying goes, a picture is worth 1,000 words. Many speakers find that first showing the audience a picture is a great way to create interest.
Have a look at this graph. As you can see, despite a rise in profits, our return on investment has plummeted over the last 3 years.
As the old adage goes, a picture is worth 1,000 words. Now, take a look at this.
Take a look at this before and after picture. On the left, you see our factory before the renovation. On the right, after.
Can you think of more ways to get the audience's attention? I'm sure you can. No matter which way you choose, and you're not limited to one, you can combine them. The main point is to establish relevance to the audience. Establishing relevance means showing that what we have to say is important to them. How does Steve do this? He combines two of the strategies we've just studied. First, he makes a startling statement.
Swift lost $181,000 in profits last summer due to a 16% drop in productivity in our production center here.
Then, he poses a problem.
That's not unusual. This factory has a history of low summer productivity. But if I told you we could reverse the trend and bring summer productivity in line with the rest of the year, would you be interested?
Usually, it's best to keep the attention step brief, as Steve has done. Ask yourself, how can I create the greatest amount of interest with the fewest amount of words? Now it's your turn to practice. This practice will focus on just two of the attention-getting strategies: posing problems and making startling statements. First, you'll hear the name of the strategy, either problem or startling statement. Then, you'll hear some information. After the beep, create a sentence based on the information you hear. For startling statements, you can say things like, "Here's a little known fact," or "It's hard to believe, but," or "Did you know?" For posing problems, you can use language like, "Have you ever wondered why?" and "What if?" or "What if I told you?" For example, if you hear problem, marketing budget cut by 75%, how do we promote our product? You could say something like, "What if I told you your marketing budget was cut by 75%? How would you go about promoting your product?" After each exercise, we'll play an example answer that you can compare with your own. Are you ready? Let's begin.
Q1, problem. Hold fewer meetings, but improve communication.
Answer. What if I told you there was a way to hold fewer meetings and improve communication? Would you be interested?
Q2, startling statement. McDonald's is the #1 owner of property in the world.
Answer. Here's a little known fact. McDonald's is the #1 owner of property in the world.
Q3, problem. Half of new businesses fail within 4 years.
Answer. Have you ever wondered why half of new businesses fail within 4 years of starting up?
Q4, startling statement. 75% of US employees are looking for a new job.
answer. Did you know that 75% of U.S. employees are looking for a new job?
How did you do? Go back and try them again. After you've practiced a couple times, try substituting language. How does saying the same thing in different ways change the impact of your statement? That's all for today's show. Today we've covered the first step in the Monroe Sequence, an effective process for persuading people to accept your ideas. In the second episode in this series, we'll study the next step. We'll see how Steve carefully builds up a vivid picture of the problem until his audience is literally begging him for a solution. Then, in the third episode, we'll look at the remaining three parts of the persuasive sequence: the satisfaction step, the visualization step, and the action step. Remember to read the study notes for this and other episodes, which you can sign up for at www.businessenglishpod.com. There, you'll find a complete transcript, vocabulary, and additional practice. Thanks for listening, and see you next time. Want to get more out of Business English Pod? Then go to www.businessenglishpod.com and sign up as a premium member. Premium members can access detailed study notes and the new Phrasecast to practice all the useful language we featured today. You're listening to Business English Pod, the business English podcast for professionals on the move. Welcome to the second in this three-part series on persuasion. What are the 5 steps of the persuasive process? Let's review the Monroe Sequence. First, get the audience's attention. Second, establish a need. Third, satisfy that need. Fourth, visualize the future. And finally, ask for action. Last time, we heard a bad example and a good example of persuasion. Then we covered the first step of the Monroe Sequence. We learned that to be persuasive, you first need to get the audience's attention by establishing the relevance of the topic. We also talked about how it's extremely important to relate your proposal directly to your audience's needs. In today's show, we'll be continuing on that theme by looking in detail at the second step in the Monroe Sequence, the need step. This is where you demonstrate to the audience that there is a serious problem with the current situation. This prepares them psychologically to accept your solution. Let's continue listening to the good example of persuasion that we started last time. Remember, Steve has just gotten his audience's attention by pointing out the amount of money that Swift loses every year due to turnover. He has also posed a problem. How can we reverse the trend and turn the situation around? During the listening, you'll hear Steve's managers, Glenn and Sally, make occasional comments as Steve presents his idea. And while you listen, see if you can answer these questions. You can check your answers in a few days on the website. First, what is the highest temperature in the welding room? Second, what does Steve present first, the problem or the solution? And finally, what kind of strategies does Steve use to paint a vivid picture of the need for a solution?
And bring summer productivity in line with the rest of the year. Would you be interested?
What do you have in mind, Steve?
Well, the problem starts in the welding room. Due to high turnover and low efficiency from replacement workers, we just don't make as many frames as we do during the rest of the year. And if we don't have frames, we can't make bikes.
Where's the high turnover come from?
Good question. Both the high turnover and low efficiency are because of the extreme heat in the welding room. Temperatures average 6 degrees over the outside temperatures. During the summer, when the work starts at 8, it's already 31 degrees in the welding room. By 11:30, it's at least 37. On 6 days last summer, it hit 41 degrees.
That's hot.
Yes, and when the temperatures are that high, we may be violating government regulations. And as you know, these production workers are always working on moving or carrying frames, which weigh as much as 8 kilos. When temperatures hit 35 degrees, they slow down. With no relief in sight, many of them quit.
How many was it again last year?
Well, this summer we have already replaced 11 of the 36 employees in the welding room. Turnover for the whole summer will usually run over 50%. When someone quits, it takes an average of 5 days to find and train a replacement. During that time, the trainee produces nothing. For another 5 days, the new person can work at only about half speed. According to my calculations, we are producing 12,300 less units per summer than we would without this turnover.
Wow, 12,300. Is it really that much?
Yes, and figuring a profit of $16 on every bike we sell, those 12,300 products we aren't making are costing us $200,000 in potential earnings.
That's pretty significant. What will it take to fix the problem?
So far, Steve has not yet said a single word about the solution to his problem, has he? Up to this point, he has just been focusing on establishing a clear need. This is a key strategy in the Monroe sequence. First, demonstrate a serious problem with the current situation. When the audience feels a clear need to solve the problem, they'll be ready to accept your proposal. This form of persuasion, presenting the need before the solution, is often called the indirect method. When is the indirect method more appropriate than a direct approach? You'll have to rely on your knowledge of the situation, the culture, and the audience to make that judgment. Generally, the direct method, giving the solution first, may be more useful when you're dealing with a small problem or when you know the individuals involved very well. But there is no doubt that indirect persuasion is a powerful tool. As Monroe would say, by following the natural human decision-making process, first, we feel a need, then we look for a solution, you can more easily overcome all kinds of resistance or opposition to your ideas. How does Steve establish a need for his proposal? Let's look at some language he uses. First, he discusses the origin or beginning of the problem.
Well, the problem starts in the welding room.
What are some other ways you can refer to the origin of a problem?
Well, this issue goes back to a communication breakdown.
The root cause of the problem has to do with lack of supervision and poor training.
We can trace the origin of this issue to poor implementation of risk controls.
Next, Steve explains the background of the problem.
Due to high turnover and low efficiency from replacement workers, we just don't make as many frames as we do during the rest of the year. And if we don't have frames, we can't make bikes.
Steve is building up the reasons for the problem here. He's painting a vivid picture of the causes. What are some other phrases you can use to do this?
Because of an overall decrease in the numbers of face-to-face meetings, our staff just don't get to know each other. So that basic element of trust is lacking.
Owing to high turnover, there are really no qualified mentors in this team. On top of that, management has not been conducting sufficient oversight of new hires.